So if anybody doesn't know, I'm Clint Flack. I'm from the Mercer Museum. For the last several months, we've worked with Bensalem Township, Bensalem Historical Society, exploring the buildings here at Growden, trying to come up with a history, when they were built, who lived here, etc. We've worked with Michael Cuba, Oxford University, doing dendrochronology. They did a study here, so we're going to find out when the buildings are built. We're doing all of this because Growden is an extremely important historical set of buildings here in Bucks County. It's very unique. It contains buildings that date back to some of the things with the Founding Fathers and Loyalists during the Revolutionary War. So it's important to understand when they were actually built. So that's why we're here today. And without further ado, Michael Cuba is going to tell us what we learned in doing dendrochronology.
Oh, okay. My name is Michael Cuba. I'm with the Oxford Dendrochronology Laboratory in England. A few months ago, Dan Miles from the laboratory and myself came and took just over 30 samples from 3 of the structures, from this building, the kitchen next door, and the ruin behind us. Essentially, we tried to take 10 samples per phase of construction to date them. And what we came up with in this building, we took 13 samples out of 10 timbers. So a couple of timbers had multiple samples taken out. And most of these timbers were from the basement and the attic where they were accessible. And most of them dated, 8 of them dated to the winter of 1741-42. And then a couple of the other ones dated to spring of 1742.
Amazing.
And this was conclusive. One of the reasons that we take as many samples as we do is to look for repetition, to make sure that we're not in a situation where we're looking at a recycled timber or a replaced timber or something that's introduced. So we have a lot of material dispersed throughout the house that we had sampled. We did the same thing in the kitchen and had identical results. Most of the timbers there were cut down in the winter of 1741-42, and then the summer beam in that structure was a season later. The structure behind us, which is a real curiosity, we had little in the way of expectation. There was some rotten material that we found, literally picked pieces off of the ground and took pieces out of mortise pockets. We didn't find bark edge anywhere, which is essential to getting an actual felling date. So the only thing that we're able to offer currently is the last ring counted. So that's not necessarily a construction date, but you know that it couldn't have been built before that. And so at the moment, the last ring counted that we have is 1718. And so we had taken 11 samples out of that structure. They appear to be consistent and coeval with the other 2 structures. So it seems likely that that was built when this and the kitchen wing were built. What we're going to try to do is, I think there are 4 more timbers in that structure that we'd like to look at just to see if there's any drifting of rings. Can we pick up a couple more years in the sequence? So at some point when there isn't a foot of snow on the ground, I'll take another run at it and we'll take another couple samples and see if we can add to that story.
Sally, why don't you come up with me a minute? Sally, being one of the Van's aunts, actually, she can tell us a lot about it, and just give us a little bit about, because you were always working on it. You knew a lot about this before you started. We didn't know exactly, but give us a little what you guys are doing.
What we're doing.
Sally has done an incredible job here with with our Historical Society, but I'd like her to say a few words because she does so much of this.
Well, like I always tell you, Mayor, they came over with the Vandergriffs. Actually, they came down from New Amsterdam. The Vandergriffs and the Van Zants came at the same time. And if I still owned all the property that they bought, he'd work for me. Because each of the children, and there were 11 children in the one family that came down, each of them bought 500 acres along the Neshaminy. All along. They would have owned where
thousands of acres. They had And the Van Zandt last farm, I remember, was where the high school's at. That's one of
Yeah.
the, that's probably with Bensalem High School. That was a Van Zandt farm that I remember.
Yeah.
That-
And they were all farmers, most of them, you know, were
And
farmers.
pertaining to where we're standing today, did you bring those papers, the original from England? You
Yes,
just got
they're
them?
right there. Well, let me just preface it with how I met these people. There were a few of us in the office on a Wednesday, and there was a woman and a man came in, and they were from England, Nigel and Cass Ward. They descend from Joseph Growden that came here, from his sister Jennifer. She never left England, never left Trevose, England. And they were looking up their background. And so I brought them out here with 2 other members of the society, and we walked all around the outside. I have a picture of them standing at the front door. And I said, well, how are you getting back to Philadelphia? They had stayed in Philadelphia. And they said, well, we'll walk to the train station. I said, you're not walking to the train station. So one of our members took them back to the train. And they got on, and after they left, I wrote them a note saying, you know, thank you for the visit. It was wonderful meeting you. And could you help us out by giving us anything you can find from Trevose, England? Well, this is the first thing I got from them, and that was
Well,
over
I
a
think-
year ago.
We'll have to have Darren take some stills or something to put
Yeah.
it in. There's a whole bunch of them, but it
This
brings
is
back what
the
you're
house
doing.
in
There's the
Trevose,
guy from,
England.
coming from England to build this.
Yeah. I only got this last night. About 10 o'clock. This is the home now. This is 2025.
Do we know what year that is?
Now, wait, there's another picture in here.
We're not born all you, are we?
Here's the picture. It was run down, and this says 1987.
Wow.
And the
So it's
piece-
still standing.
It's still standing. Here it says Trevose
Trevose.
Barton, that's the sign to go into the house.
Trevose, which is right up here.
I know, yeah.
So we know where it got Trevose, the name, don't we?
Yeah. And this, I have to get somebody who's better at doing, shrinking things on, printing them, because up here it says Trevose, and all of these, there's another one here. It's here, it says Trevose Barton. Here's where that house is, right here. So I'll have to get Russ or somebody that knows what to do with a computer to get a better picture. And this.
It's great that we have this. Now we know England or
Yeah.
here and how they doing
This
all
one,
that.
I cut the top off. It says lease Trevis, whatever they call it, at Trevose, at St. Marin. And here is Lawrence Growden. It was 1702, and it's a manuscript, and it's
So we
the
can
lease
know it.
for the house in England. And I'm going to write them back and thank them very much. But in this letter, she said they have a lot more pictures and things that they will send us.
Wow.
So it's exciting.
Very exciting.
So this comes back to you, all of this stuff, and it's amazing it came last night.
Yeah.
So that you'd have it for today that you
That
would.
is amazing.
Actually, we should give you guys a copy of all
Love it,
this.
yeah.
Yeah, you'll make sure they get a
Yeah.
copy of it all. And
Oh, I'll
uh,
give everybody a copy. You a copy, you a copy, you a copy, everybody a copy. But I
why
want
don't
to
you
get
add
that one
something,
back.
what we did talk today?
Shrunk a little bit so we get the whole
If
thing,
you
Russ.
make a little bit of a synopsis of what you think.
Well, I suppose one thing I should clarify is that based on the felling dates, if we're looking at 1741, 42, one, when we talk about winter, it's because with the process what we see is the end of the growth cycle, but we can't differentiate between December and January. And that we've got other timbers that are dating into the spring of 1742. So it is most likely that construction happened during 1742, the main construction. The timbers in
I
the
was
structure are
right.
particularly interesting.
You always,
In the basement here, you can see with the large timbers are hewn by an axe, so they cut the tree down and they square it up with an axe. But many of the joists were then subsequently pit sawn, which is sort of an early technology. Usually sawmills come into settlements pretty quickly, and that you don't have to do it manually. And so this is sort of a rare example here of where you've got hewn timbers that are then sawn into the individual joists. So that was an early detail. And when we were looking at the frame, trying to make determinations of what material looks original, what looks added, I think we had all concluded that the rafters and the roof framing of this structure are clearly later. And then the interior plan of this house has been, as far as I can tell, completely redone. And there's a lot of evidence where you guys turned over some of those floorboards in the attic, and you can see the original framing of the house. I would say that's worth serious consideration and study. Even if you just took thermal imaging cameras or something just to look through the floor, see where the framing is, you might have some idea of how this house was originally laid out. So I would say in the case of all three structures, or at least these two conclusively, we know 1742.
I'm just wondering if it kind of, what he has over there, if they use kind of the same, I don't know. I mean,
yeah, even at the same time, I would expect sawmills are ubiquitous at that point in England. And even here in the United States, the first sawmill was established at Plymouth in 1627. So I was actually a little bit surprised to see something that's pit sawn in this region this late, because there were certainly sawmills in the Philadelphia area. I think one of the big issues is roads, transportation, and carriage length. So if you've got a sawmill, the carriage is only so long. A lot of times carriage length is determined by how far can you reasonably transport the timbers. So more than likely, these timbers were felled on this property, hewn right here, and put up on a trestle, or they may have dug a pit to do the sawing, and that's saving you on the expense and the labor of transportation. Otherwise, the construction, the detailing looks just as you would expect for the period. There's not a lot of technological changes between the 17th century and the 18th century running up to the Revolutionary War. So when we're looking at joinery and timber configurations, we're always looking for different tool marks that indicate some level of industrialization, things that we know dates for. And in the case of this house, it really is in the middle of a period where there was little in the way of technological development, and it almost looks a little primitive just because it wasn't so settled here. But I think that all this was produced right on the property. I'll also add that one of the reasons that we can make an interpretation based on the felling date to say that the structure was built likely immediately or soon after is green wood is easier to work. And by green, I mean wet. When it's fresh off of the stump and it's got a high moisture content, it's much easier to cut. And as the wood dries out, you'll find that cutting tools have a tendency to tear more than slice. So even looking at the surfaces of the timbers or the joinery, and you can see with a little bit of raking light how cleanly they're sliced. And that slicing is a pretty good indication that these things were worked wet. Another thing is because you've got, in some cases, original masonry, shrinkage. So you put these things in wet. If you've got large timbers like the summer beams that are in the basement, they'll shrink over time until they reach equilibrium and dry out. And so sometimes you can see gaps between, say, mortar or stonework and original timber. That's evidence of drying. So that's another indication that it wasn't cut and seasoned. It didn't sit for 20 or 30 years before they used it. They cut it, they used it.
do you have any of those tools at the museum that they use?
Oh yeah, we've got
Yes,
yes, most of them.
That's why I asked you. I knew you'd probably have them up there, so that's something they can come up and see how they actually did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a closing word?
Yeah, I would just like to say, this is amazing information. This confirms this is the structure that's here during the Revolutionary War, which is really the most important history of this. And it also offers an opportunity for more research because originally this structure, was supposedly believed to have dated till the 1680s when the first Growdens come over. But we now know that none of these buildings appear to be from that period of time, which means on this vast acreage that the Growdens owned, somewhere else was the original settlement in the 1680s into the 1690s up till 1742. So it opens the opportunity for more research to try and figure out where that was. And most importantly, this confirms this is the buildings that were here during the Revolutionary War with the Galloways and all that saga that took place. So just want to thank Michael Cuba for your help.
Yeah, Michael,
Mayor,
thank you
Thanks
so
for having
much.
me.
Bensalem
Really.
Historical
Thank you.
Society, thank you for all that you've done so that we could learn what we did today.
Yeah, we're very, very grateful. It's something that we need to know about our own town. I was actually born on a famous place, Dunks Ferry Road.
Yes.
I don't know Dunks Ferry Road.
That's what we got to check out next.
Yeah, that's where I was born there. So, my mother found me some reeds along the side of the river there. You know, that's,
It's right out of the Bible.
Anyway, thanks everybody. Thank you, Kyle, for working with them and getting it done, and certainly Sally and certainly the Historical Society. This is big news. This is
It
really
is.
big news. So thanks everybody. Thanks for being here. Hope to see you
Thanks
again
again.
soon.
Yeah, anytime.
Thank you.